Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to our first ResiStat meeting. And I want to welcome all of you to the meeting. I want to introduce our panelists. We're sorry, first of all, for the delayed launch of the meeting. We're having some technical difficulties, but hopefully our audio and the visuals on the screen are clear to you all. Tonight's meeting topic is housing issues during COVID-19. It's an issue we're all too familiar with, as we were in a housing crisis before this pandemic and this health crisis fell upon us. It's certainly exacerbating and compounding many of the social inequities, especially around access to housing. And in light of the eviction moratorium about to be lifted, a threat of being lifted on the 17th, important topic tonight. Before we get going, I do want to make a couple of announcements. First, on interpretation. Switch that slide. Due to a technical issue, we're unable to provide live closed caption tonight's meeting, but there is interpretation available. Will they be introducing themselves? In Spanish, in Portuguese, and just in Spanish tonight. So if you're having difficulty understanding what we're saying, just communicate with us through the Q&A function or the chat function. So let me take the time right now to introduce our panelists. Again, I'm Mayor Joe Curtatone. I have the honor and privilege of being the mayor of the city. Joining us tonight on the panel are two members of the City Council. First at-large City Councilor Kristen Stresso. He'll wave on the screen. Ward 2 City Councilor, Mr. J.T. Scott. Welcome, Councilor Scott. Needs no introduction for those of you very much engaged in the housing issues. She is the rock star advocate for housing well before she came to work for the city. Miss Ellen Schachter, who's the director of the Office of Housing Stability. The director of Housing Division for the city of Somerville, Mr. Mike Maloney. The Inclusionary Housing Program Manager, Ms. Itzel Polanco-Cabadas. And our Office of Housing Stability Case Manager, who works so closely with so many people in our community in need, Ms. Lydia Lopez. I want to thank them all for joining and being part of this panel. And we want to welcome you all to tonight's meeting. As is with the start of every public meeting in this new normal that we're living in the era of COVID, we start our virtual town halls with a general situational update on our response to COVID. We're certainly not out of the woods. That doesn't need to be emphasized, since Somerville just ticked into the red. In fact, we do expect the situation to become worse over the next few months. The state of the public health emergency is important context for the issues that affect all our residents. But so in terms of where we are now, let me just describe the information before you. The current total case count in Somerville is roughly 1,359, with sadly 42 people who have passed on, who have died as a result of COVID. In the Commonwealth, if you don't realize it, about 9,500 people have perished. And in this nation, it's now well over 217,000. A reminder that beyond statistics, these are real souls, beloved members of our families, of our communities that we'll never get back. We've seen a recent uptick in cases. And as of today, there are still 169 active cases with a daily prevalence rate of 8.2 per 100,000. That's what has caused us to go into the red. As soon as you're at 8, you cross that threshold. And that's of no surprise. Yesterday, again, we were categorized as red, which is high-risk community, along with additional 62 other communities. In fact, since last week, there's been about a 50% increase in the number of communities in the Commonwealth, particularly in this region, that are now in high-risk category. In fact, the prevalence rate for the Commonwealth is 8.6, so we are in fact a high-risk Commonwealth. The situation in Massachusetts, again, is similar to what we're seeing here locally, an uptick in cases as more communities see outbreaks and are categorized as high-risk. The total case count in Mass, if you haven't seen it already, is a little over 140, almost 141,000, and again, almost 9,700 deaths. There are 9,647 deaths as of right now. And we have been warned by experts to expect a fall-winter surge in cases, especially in light as we are entering the cold and flu season. It's a reminder to you all to get your flu shot, please. But the surge in cases which we have been preparing for. And that's a snapshot. As you have, we ask you to visit the city's website, www.SomervilleMA.gov/coronavirus, for more information, and visit our dashboard, and please reach out to us for any particular questions. Let me just say, as to Somerville's status as red, we expect to go back and forth, especially since the region is so tightly integrated and densely populated, and our frontline workers and people ride the same subway systems, and essential workers are working the same jobs. And so we continue to analyze the root of any outbreak or spike in cases, and we'll be updating the community real time if we make and when we make any decisions in terms of curtailing back activities or implementing more interventions. Now moving on to the housing impacts as related to COVID-19. As with so many issues, COVID didn't create the housing crisis. It certainly exacerbated and deepened the inequities that were already present in our community, in our Commonwealth, in our country. Before COVID, more than half of the renters in the Boston area were spending 30% or more of their income on housing, which is just unsustainable according to any guideline, but according to federal guidelines. Go next slide. Between the loss of wages and the existing housing insecurity, the pandemic has pushed many of our most vulnerable residents into desperate circumstances. And we also know the housing crisis has been an emergency again far before COVID. This is only compounded given we are in light of the eviction moratorium about to be lifted. Move on, next slide. This speaks of itself. A quarter of Massachusetts renters have slight confidence or no confidence in their ability to pay next month's rent. That's why people on this panel, your counselors, myself, people who work for city agency, activists, advocates, your state delegation led by Representative Connolly and others have been fighting so hard to make sure we're not putting people on the street in the middle of a pandemic, which infuriates so many of us that we would even consider doing that. And this is a real threat to people's lives, to our collective health, to the security of our communities, to a threat to our economy, which is already on its knees. So this lack of confidence should come on no surprise to folks. We know that for a fact. In fact, we know that 60% of households in the United States have people in those households have either lost a job, had their wages reduced, or lost their business. So this is a problem that's only going to get worse without direct relief to renters and small businesses and people on the lowest ends on the economic thresholds in our communities and Commonwealth country. Next slide, please. Among the renters in Mass, we know who are behind.
Los inquilinos de Massachusetts sabemos que están atrás.
Be evicted within the next 2 months. Certainly, the threat and looming lifting of the eviction moratorium doesn't bode well for people's confidence or security. And it's certainly, I think others in this panel will speak to the stories they're hearing directly from constituents and the people we serve about the trauma and stress it's putting on families. The Office of Housing Stability has seen an exponential increase in the average monthly cases just since the beginning of COVID, not just recently, but going back several months. Luckily, we have an office led by Ellen Schechter and staffed by so many competent people to engage our community. Most communities in the Commonwealth don't, which is even creating even more stress as the governor's office in the Commonwealth will really push all the questions and cases onto municipalities with the responsibility of helping working people and families and those most vulnerable to navigate the bureaucracy of the housing courts or the court system during eviction proceedings. And I can't even imagine municipalities who don't have the framework of a housing stability office like we do here in Somerville. But as you can see, we're going to huge rise in the number of cases that we've been facilitating or engaging with since over the last several months. This has often been recited. We'll go to the next slide, please. Spanish speakers actually account for more than half of the rental assistance cases during the COVID-19 crisis. Once again, this shouldn't be a surprise. COVID has highlighted, put a glaring spotlight on the inequities in our entire social system, whether it's access to housing, or who works the white collar jobs, who can work virtual from home, or how our transportation system doesn't serve all, our healthcare system, but also who's getting infected more than people like me, most of us on this panel. They're Black and brown people, they're immigrants, they're elderly, those most vulnerable, those who have projected worse health outcomes before COVID. And it's the same people we're going to be pushing out into the street in the middle of a pandemic. Ellen and her team can speak more of this. And I'm going to pass it off to Ellen to talk about the help that's available, and then we'll get to questions after we get to the panel. Ellen?
Thank you very much, Mayor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the eviction moratorium. People may be aware that a federal moratorium was put into place that expires on December 31st, 2020. What that moratorium has now been interpreted to do is to prevent the physical eviction of tenants. So originally advocates had believed, and some advocates still take the position, that the moratorium would prevent a notice to quit or court action until December 31st. But at this time, unless there's a court decision interpreting otherwise, that is no longer going to be the case. So under the federal moratorium, in order to have protections, a tenant has to provide a declaration and give that to their owner, indicating that they have had a COVID-related loss in income or increase in expenses. Those declarations are available on our website at www.SomervilleMA.gov/OHS. For new cases, however, even with that declaration going to the landlord, it does not appear at this time that it's significantly going to impact the timing of evictions because of the way that has been interpreted by in a memo by the Center for Disease Control, again, which says it doesn't prevent landlords from filing, but only prevents physical eviction. Probably many of you know that there is a state eviction moratorium in place. That eviction is set to expire on Saturday. There was an emergency attempt by Representative Connolly that we supported to try to say that we needed at least a temporary extension of that moratorium because there are so many critical pieces of the puzzle that have to be put into place. We'll talk a little bit more about what the governor has proposed in terms of his diversion strategy, but there is simply not enough time before Saturday to have all the necessary pieces in place. And even with what the governor has put, there are huge gaps in what is available. So we'll be talking about that, but the state moratorium does end this weekend. Somerville is one of the municipalities in the state that put out a Board of Health order, the mayor and Health and Human Services, which also, like the federal moratorium, prevents the physical eviction of tenants. And this will be in place until the mayor and the Board of Health determine that there is no longer a COVID emergency. And I want to tell tenants that if after this moratorium is lifted, you do receive what's called a notice of levy or a document on your door saying that the constable is coming to move you out, you're only going to get 48 hours notice. It is our position that that cannot be enforced in the city of Somerville, but we need to know immediately. The law department is prepared to come in and file litigation on behalf of the city to enforce this order, but we can't do it unless we know immediately about any notice of levy that a tenant has gotten, because there simply won't be sufficient time. So please tell your neighbors, tell your friends, if anybody is getting that kind of notice of levy, the OHS needs to know immediately. Thank you. Next slide. Thanks. So just briefly, that was a little bit about the eviction moratorium in general. Just did want to say a couple of words about the Office of Housing Stability, what our mission is, what we do, and how you can reach us. We have a multi-part mission to prevent the involuntary displacement of Somerville residents, to rehouse the homeless and those needing to relocate, and to enact policies to combat displacement and enhance tenants' rights. And there's two real main components of this. One piece is our direct service. You heard a little bit about that.
Una parte es nuestro servicio directo. Ya he escuchado un poco sobre lo.
In total, over 1,100 families coming to us. Lydia Lopez, who works very, very closely with the immigrant communities, will be speaking in a little while. But daily, we are hearing from families, some of whom have had members die who were breadwinners, many of whom have lost their income. So our office is committed to doing the best that we can to directly assist those tenants in remaining in their homes or in relocating. How to get help, there's two primary ways. The easiest way is by going online at, here's our website here. You click make a referral, put in some basic information, and we will be getting back to you. Again, Lydia Lopez will explain a little bit more about how that process works. And also, this is our intake line. We do have staff on site that speak Spanish and Portuguese, and a contract with Language Line to be able to communicate to any resident in any language. Next slide, please. I wanted to just remind everybody about an ordinance that was passed, and thanks to Representative Scott, I can't remember if Councilor Stresso was also here at the time that this passed. Oh my, no, okay. So, but thank you to Councilor Scott for supporting this bill. The Housing Stability Notification Act is a law which requires property owners to give tenants specific documents with information on it anytime they serve a notice to quit, a court complaint, or a notice of lease non-renewal. And what those documents have, as you can see, they have information about where to go for rental assistance and where to go for legal help. In addition, there's some really important comprehensive information about tenants' rights and landlords' rights and responsibilities in an eviction case. And those documents must again be served with the notice to quit. The purpose of this ultimately is to get to win-win solutions, if at all possible, for landlords and tenants. We know that there are some landlords out there that need to get rent in order to pay their mortgages. And these documents are meant to put everybody on notice of what the resources are that are available, and to really give an opportunity to apply for assistance quickly, so that there is time to do that before any kind of eviction case would have to be filed. These documents are available on our website in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Nepali. And all owners can get those documents there that must be served. If you get a notice to quit or a court summons and you have not gotten these critical documents, please call the Inspectional Services Department. This tells you at extension 5600 to report a violation. Ultimately, there is a ticket that can be issued if the owner fails to provide this information. The first time will always be a warning. We do not want any landlords to be fined if they don't know what their obligations are under this law. But we expect, once every owner knows their obligations, that they will provide the documentation as required. We will be sending a letter out to all owners of Somerville properties, reminding them about the Housing Stability Notification Act and their obligations under it. Next slide, please. Okay. And I think I'm going to turn this over to Mike Filoni, Director of the Housing Division.
Thank you, Ellen. Again, I'm Mike Filoni, Housing Director, and what we want to do with this slide tonight is basically to share with you the upcoming opportunities for affordable housing in terms of either new opportunities or opportunities for, in some cases, units that are becoming newly available. And you'll see that there are basically two categories, and within the next roughly 5 to 6 months, we have a number of affordable housing, income restricted housing opportunities in our pipeline, and that is what my colleague at Sal Blanco Cabadas manages. So there will continue to be opportunities upcoming, and we can provide information at the bottom of the slide. Actually, there is information on how to access this information in an ongoing way. But in terms of upcoming homeownership opportunities, those will be coming up within the next several months. There's a total of 11 units. The single biggest one is at 163 Glen Street, which is a homeownership development that Somerville Community Corporation is in the process of finishing right now. And so they are just beginning marketing on that effort within the next week or so. And then the other ones are smaller opportunities at 88 Wheatland Street, 20 Rush Street, and 32 Glen Street. And those are a combination of units that an existing owner is selling, but it is income restricted, so it will remain affordable housing and will be accessible through applications for a new buyer. And then on the rental side of the inclusionary housing pipeline, if you go out 5 or 6 months, there will be a significant number of new rental opportunities, and they're on the right side of your screen. And the first is in April, where there will be 4 inclusionary rental units at 10 to 12 Ward Street, just off Medford Street. And then in June, a significant number of units at Assembly Row as the build out there continues. The next set of residential rental units, just over 30, a total of 31 units will be available. The developer is projecting those will be ready for occupancy as of June of next year. Thank you. And I believe we're going back to you, Ellen, is that right?
Thank you. Yes. This slide provides some resources for people in the community that are looking for different kinds of services in order to help with housing stability. On the left here, you can see that for help with rent or moving expenses, the Somerville Homeless Coalition, Just to Start, and the Community Action Agency of Somerville each have programs that can provide assistance with both rental arrears, and there is new money coming on that can provide prospective subsidies, in some cases up to 12 months, although those are limited. You can see on the bottom, we have resources for immigrants. The Welcome Project does have a fund that can help with some expenses for immigrants, so that's their contact number. And then on the right here are the places to call for legal help and advocacy in evictions. I'm excited to say that De Novo is a legal services agency, which up until now did not serve the city of Somerville, except for folks 60 and older. And we've just recently entering into a contract with them, so they will be joining us as a legal resource for our tenants, in addition to Cambridge and Somerville Legal Services, Harvard Legal Aid, and the Community Action Agency of Somerville does the eviction prevention and housing stability work, but they are non-attorneys. Next slide. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the announcement that Governor Baker made recently about $171 million in eviction prevention assistance. I'll tell you a little bit about what that includes, what is being rolled out, but also to tell you that in our opinion, and I think the mayor supports this as well as both of the city councilors that are on here and probably everybody on this call, that it really is insufficient to meet the scope of the demand in order to stabilize people's tenancies. So we're grateful to the governor for what he did, but it's not enough. And we're going to talk a little bit later about legislative action that can bring us more of what we need to try to really maintain housing stability in our city. So what the governor did do was to announce an increase in rental assistance through the Residential Assistance for Families in Transition, or RAFT program. There are many families out in Somerville that we have helped at the Office of Housing Stability to apply for RAFT. It is not an easy process. We are there and available and willing to help people through that process, especially for people who don't speak English. It is a fairly complex application and document requests. But the amount of money for each family that is now increased from $4,000 to $10,000. So this means that even families that have already gotten RAFT may be available for additional funding. I will say that in the next week or two, there are going to be rules coming out which will tell us how these funds are going to be distributed and what the criteria are. So there may be some different criteria than had been applied in the past. The second piece of this is what's called IRMA, and this is a state program for people, as we say, between 50% and 80% of AMI. More homeowners that need help with foreclosures may fit into this income category. It's $86,650 for a family of 3. But just to know, both mortgage assistance for low-income homeowners and low-income landlords and rental assistance is available up to that level. It is not just a poverty program. The home-based program is for homeless families, and essentially this is a program where if a family would qualify for shelter, and that means they have nowhere to go and they have minor children, there is a diversion program which can pay for up to $10,000 a year for homeless families to subsidize a private rent in the private market. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the Access to Counsel initiative. My office has been very involved in the core team on trying to advance something called right to counsel legislation. And I am going to talk about that in a little while. But the concept of right to counsel is that every tenant should have an opportunity to have an attorney in an eviction case. In Somerville, over 90% of landlords were represented when we last did statistics, and under 10% of tenants were represented. Is a huge imbalance of power. So we have long been pushing for access to counsel. What the governor has announced does not do everything that we want, but it is a really important new program which will provide for attorneys for unrepresented low-income litigants in housing court. And I just wanted to point out, in Somerville, half of eviction cases are filed in housing court and half are filed in district court. This right to counsel initiative only attaches to cases in housing court, but anybody whose case is in district court has the right to move their case to housing court. So the long and the short of it is, if you have questions, if things come up, OHS is here for you, other agencies are here for you. We're going to do our very best to hook you up with legal counsel and to make sure that you have the help we need. And we're hoping that there will be at least enough that there will be enough money in the fund, or that it will get refunded if necessary, to make sure everyone has the counsel they need. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Ellen. I just want to chime in there because what Ellen has mentioned is this is a good start, but in terms of not only needing more money and resources towards it, it has to be accompanied by the extension of the eviction moratorium. I mean, many of these things are not up and running. Access to right to counsel is a good launch. We commend the governor and the administration on this and those who advocated for it. It's not ready to go on the 17th. And then you can just, if you can see all the different options someone who's being evicted, or perhaps someone who doesn't speak English, may have to consider, and how to maneuver the bureaucracy, and not knowing whether you can move your case to housing court from district court, it is very confusing. And to, again, as I've advocated as recent as this afternoon with the Lieutenant Governor, that there needs to be an extension of that January 1. So those of you who are listening in and tuning in on city cable, please call the governor's office. Let them know that.
And thank you, Mayor. And the other thing that I wanted to say, just so people understand, is the governor has not put in place a mandatory change to the way eviction process works. What we were hoping for and asking was that give tenants the opportunity, the time they need to see if they can get rental assistance. And if they can, don't let them be evicted. Right now, the diversion program that the governor is suggesting is a voluntary program, which allows landlords and tenants to together decide to postpone an eviction to apply for rental assistance. And we really think there has to be the right to do this, because we just don't want to see people who are evicted through no fault of their own, because a rental assistance application takes longer than the eviction process. That's something that's out of their control, and we really need to call on the governor to make sure that nobody gets evicted because their rental assistance application is taking too long to be processed. Okay, and that next slide, please. So along those lines, what are we pushing for? What do we hope that you will all advocate for that can really fill in all of those gaps of what the governor's program is doing? The first bill that we are supporting, and I thank both of the city councilors on this call, and of course the mayor, for coming out in support of what is now called House 5018. This is generally known as the Housing Guarantees Bill. It essentially would give up to a 12-month extension on the moratorium, but in that really do all the things that are necessary to help both landlords and tenants. The bill provides for a dollar-for-dollar tax relief for any landlords who are losing rent as a result of, or losing income as a result of loss of rent payments. So again, it extends the moratorium, but it gives landlords a clear path for getting financial relief. And it puts together other housing guarantees, such as keeping rent in place for 12 months without increases in this emergency time, so that we can do everything we can to prevent displacement because of the pandemic and during the pandemic, which is so dangerous. The second bill that we're really still supporting and urge you all to support as well is our transfer fee legislation. This is a home rule amendment, which is saying we desperately need affordable housing. At the end of this pandemic, we're going to need it more than ever, and we really need a funding source in which to do this. This is a home rule amendment that was passed by the city council, which places a reasonable fee on real estate transactions, which would go to the funding of affordable housing in our city. There are about 7 cities and towns that have home rule petitions, including Concord, Boston, Somerville, Provincetown, and others, all of whom are really struggling with how to have the municipal funding we need to seed affordable housing. All this does is ask the legislature for permission for us to do what we have decided to do in our city. So we will continue to work on that bill. You next see an act promoting housing stability through the right to counsel. Again, this is the legislation I was referring to. The right to counsel concept is originally not only about COVID, but that there should be right to counsel in eviction cases, in all kinds of eviction cases, whether or not related to COVID. New York City, Los Angeles has a right to counsel. Other cities and towns around the nation have a right to counsel, and we really think it's time that Massachusetts come on board and recognize that sometimes the consequences of eviction are even greater than criminal charges. And like people have a right to counsel in criminal cases, once you're evicted from your house, it can be incredibly difficult to get other housing. We really need to make sure that that doesn't happen to anybody where it can be prevented. And last, another piece of legislation, this is what I was just speaking to, a bill called the Homes Act, Senate H24. And this bill would essentially allow for eviction records to be sealed under certain circumstances. Right now, even if an eviction case gets dismissed, even if there's no grounds for it whatsoever, it shows up on a public record that can then be used by landlord screening agencies to deny somebody housing. So this is a really important piece of the puzzle as well, to making sure that people don't have black marks against them for years and years and years for something that may be absolutely not their fault, especially right now with what we're looking at with loss of income due to COVID. And next slide. I think next slide. Okay. Mayor, I think I'm turning back to you for this one.
Yeah, sorry, I was struggling with once again with my audio. So there are some city community involved in the sponsored resources from the rental assistance money that's distributed to our partner organization, to the Somerville Cares Fund for those in really dire need, and we're working together to bring more resources to those funds. But city staff is also here to assist you from OHS, the Office of Housing Stability, the Office of Immigrant Services, Somerville, and Health and Human Services. And their links are on here as well. The Office of Housing Stability is adding a permanent position in 6 temporary staff to help residents access rental assistance. Ellen, I don't know if you want to mention anything to that. I think I would just say that we are going to have temporary
temporary assistance from additional bilingual staff, particularly for Spanish-speaking and Portuguese-speaking families who make up the bulk of our rental assistance families in need of rental assistance. We expect to bring them on in 2 weeks to start, and we're both going to work on families that have already come to us looking for assistance. But then once the moratorium ends, we're going to prioritize those families that get notices to quit or court summons, because those will be the folks that are in most desperate need for rental assistance, and we're hoping to get that to them to avoid eviction.
Thanks. We have a couple more slides, and then I do want to recognize the city councilors briefly before we take Q&A. But Ms. Lydia Lopez is going to just briefly describe and go over the sort of the process for case referral.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, I think the most important part out of all of this is how to get to us. So you can go to our website at SomervilleMA.gov/OHS and click on the Make a Referral button. There's one in English and one in Spanish. If you happen to make a mistake, we'll get it either way. Or you can give us a call at 617-625-6600, extension 258. And leave us a voicemail. We have a no wrong door policy, so if you get to us this way, through the phone, through word of mouth, we'll get to you eventually, and then you'll get to talk to our lovely intake personnel, Ms. Francelia Levanos, who will intake your information for screening, and then we will direct you to whatever resource you need, so either direct services from us or for any of our other services, as Ellen mentioned, either for housing search with CAS, for legal services with De Novo and Castle, or if need be, tenant organization with SCC, the Somerville Community Corporation. Thank you. And then very quickly, a little bit of non-housing resources. There is currently right now a moratorium on utilities that has been extended to November 15th. That's when the usual winter shutoff moratorium happens as well. So technically speaking, the moratorium right now basically has been extended until March 15th. Usually the winter moratorium is then further extended until April, but what I would just say is there is resources available for those who need it, and there are a lot of payment plans and payback plans now with providers. So I would encourage everyone to call Eversource or National Grid and ask them what options they have if need be. And then very quickly, there are a lot of food resources here in Somerville. My suggestion would be to either go to our city's website at SomervilleMA.gov/coronavirus help. We'll not only have an extensive list of resources, but any other food, financial, and housing assistance needs as well. But if you're looking for food, the Somerville Food Security Coalition is a great resource as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lydia. Before we take questions, a couple of points, and I do want to recognize the council before they speak. We're also going up against some of the competing presidential town halls, but we will be sharing the video on the city's YouTube channel and at SomervilleMA.gov/virtual town hall. And for those of you who want to send questions, please feel free to email us questions directly, but we'll be posting this ResiStat meeting on those outlets. But first, before we take a couple of questions that have started here, let me recognize firstly Councilor at Large, Ms. Kristen Stresso, and thank her for being part of this, as well as her advocacy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And so, and thank you for having me here as well. I'm Councilor Kristen Stresso, and housing stability and housing equity is a very important topic for me. Been fighting as an activist for a while and understand how vitally important it is. And I want to commend the mayor for establishing and the work that's been done previous to this, establishing the Office of Housing Stability. And I want to commend the Housing Department and the Office of Housing Stability for all of your hard work and advocacy as well. And because I really truly feel that if the Office of Housing Stability and the work that's been in place before COVID crisis, I think the narrative of Somerville would be entirely different. And I really want to say that because it's something to think about. I personally sit on I'm the chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I sit on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And if I want you to know that if you need me, reach out to me. My contact information is on the City Council website. I'm happy to talk with you and help how I can. Thank you very, very much.
I want to introduce the Council from Ward 2, passionate advocate for housing equity and affordability, Councilor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for folks who came out tonight. Thanks to the staff tonight for putting together this wonderful list of resources that are available. I think it's a credit to the city that we recognize, especially in this time of crisis, that our role is to make as many resources available as possible to protect residents who are terrified and who are really on the horrific downside of a power imbalance where abusive landlords have every advantage. It is those people who are most at risk, though, who often don't get to attend these meetings. So for the people that are here tonight, what I implore you to do is to tell your neighbors about this help. Everyone in Somerville knows somebody who is terrified that they are about to lose their home. Everyone in Somerville knows somebody who has had a landlord try to raise their rent or not renew their lease or try to evict them even in the middle of this pandemic. So making sure to let your neighbors know about these resources is really the best thing that you can do to help protect all of us. And along those lines, I'd say that in addition to these wonderful resources that the city has put together, your neighbors stand ready to fight with you. The people from mutual aid networks like Mutual Aid Medford and Somerville and City Life Vida Urbana and a great many tenant advocacy networks are prepared to go the extra mile and stand on your doorstep and keep you in your house. So if you need help connecting to any of those resources as well, or just want to understand how to navigate all these systems, again, you can reach out to the city. You can always reach out to me as well. I host office hours every Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. I'm putting that address in the chat right now for everybody. It's gotomeet.me/JTScott, and I'd be happy to help connect you to any and all resources. We're all in this together. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. And I really appreciate everybody who took time to be here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Scott and Councilor Stresso. So we have some questions, and folks, you can ask more than one question. Please feel free. I'm gonna read off, and you don't have to put your name down if you don't want, but please don't hold back. From an anonymous attendee, if you applied for RAFT and haven't heard anything back, what should you do? Thank you for that question. Ellen and the team?
Lydia, would you like to answer?
So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if someone applied for RAFT and they haven't heard anything back, what should they do? Should they reach out to your office, or what would be the next steps?
I'll go ahead and take that one. If somebody, so there's a couple of things you can do. Unfortunately, I will say that there were 2,600 backed up applications at Metro Housing at last count. So they are being particularly slow. If you have an application and you haven't heard, and I would say, and it's been more than a month since you did your application, call our office, tell us, we can get in touch with, there's two sort of systems. There's a system for tenants to apply, and then there's a system for service providers. We can certainly check for you on that application, make sure it wasn't lost, make sure it's in the system, and find out who your case manager is if you haven't been told already. That is kind of the key to moving this forward. Unfortunately, many people are having the experience that you are, and that's why it's absolutely so critical that the moratorium be extended so that these pieces can be put in place, so that people can timely get responses to their applications. I will also say that there's going to be money, there is money available in the city of Somerville through other programs, through the Somerville Homeless Coalition and through CAS, and hopefully those processes will not take as long. You can't apply for the same months that you've already applied for RAFT, but if there's additional money that's needed, you can apply there as well. But again, call our office if you haven't gotten a response, and we'll do our best to find out where your application is, what additional documents are needed, and what the next steps are.
Thanks, Ellen. The next question from an anonymous attendee, and thank you for this question, states, could you talk about the best way to approach your landlord to try to work out a payment plan?
Lydia, do you want to take that one? No, okay. I'll answer, and then we can, anybody else who's here can help as well. First of all, if you are behind in rent and you might be eligible for rental assistance, you might want to start by talking to your landlord about a couple of things, about that you're going to need their help in filling out some documents to apply for rental assistance. Make sure they know that you really want to be able to pay them, but that you have had a COVID-related loss. Again, if you've had a COVID-related income loss, please fill out that declaration for the federal moratorium that we talked about earlier, and that's available on our website under, if you just click on federal moratorium, because that will give you some protections. So make sure your landlord understands that you want to be able to pay, and that it's because of the COVID situation that you have not been able to. Get them involved, and then you can try both the rental assistance and then to see if there can be a payment plan for any remaining funds. Again, if you're not able to do that, I will say that most landlords, both because they want to get paid and because they understand the crisis, have been pretty reasonable in negotiating payment plans, but not everybody. And certainly not everybody has participated in helping tenants get rental assistance. But make sure they know you want to pay. Make sure they know that you're not just avoiding your responsibilities. Unfortunately, there's a myth out there that tenants are, in my opinion, that tenants are taking advantage of the moratorium and just deciding not to pay. And that has absolutely not been my experience based on the hundreds and hundreds of families that we've talked to. So make sure your landlord knows you're trying, make partial payments if you can, talk to them about rental assistance and talk to them about payment plans. And if you need help, call our office.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks for bringing up that point. People want to pay their bills, they want to pay their rent, they want to work. There's a certain level of dignity that comes with it. They want to do that. So that false narrative has to be squashed every time we hear it. That's just not the case. There's no evidence, by the way, supporting this. So thank you for bringing that point of clarification. The next question, and I'll invite others on here, including the councils, if you want to chime in. You've all been at the forefront of this. From an anonymous attendee, and I thank you also for this question. I know you've all have been fighting for rent control. Is there any hope of that really happening? Maybe more momentum now? Councilor Stresso, you want to start off?
I'm raising my hand like I'm in class.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think that I think that's an excellent question. I think one of the biggest I'm an optimist, so I believe in it. I also believe that we have to change the title of rent control, because I think when people hear rent control, some people close their ears immediately off. I think the concept of modernizing the concept of rent control is possible. And I believe there's a lot of support for it. I also believe that we live in Somerville and we live in a little bit of a bubble. And it is an issue that is across the whole Commonwealth. And I think that we have to really connect with our neighbors further west in the state, because I believe there would be enough support of it, and that we're not at risk of misinformation campaigns, because that is a huge barrier to some progress at a state level. But I believe that with I believe there's a good, in my opinion, I believe it, if with that, I think we could. I think we could. That's my opinion.
Council Scott?
Thanks. I mean, I think I have a little bit of a different view here, but I'd say absolutely, absolutely. But it won't happen if we just rely on elected officials to carry the torch forward. I mean, what we've seen, not just in Somerville, not just in the Commonwealth, but nationwide, is the incredible disparities and the incredible cruelty of the system that we currently live in. All of these things already existed. They've just been surfaced and exacerbated by both a completely uncaring federal administration and the catastrophe of this pandemic. So as we see our neighbors, as we see each other suffer under completely unnecessary constraints, and I think there is absolutely an opportunity to expand our rights, specifically our access to housing is a human right. The federal government, state government, every level of government hasn't funded the creation of public housing in far too long. And no amount of incremental inclusionary zoning or public-private partnerships, I believe, are going to get us to the place where we need to go in terms of making sure that everybody has the right to the dignity of a home, which is even more apparent why that's important now when it puts people's lives at risk. So I do think it's possible, but I think it involves talking to each other. I think it involves really reaching out and saying this level of cruelty is both unacceptable and unnecessary. So I wish I had a clearer path forward. I mean, there are organizations that have been working around this for a very long time. And I will say, ultimately, there is no way to phrase your right to a home as a human right in a way that's not vulnerable to bad faith arguments and to counter programming. We see daily the chief executive of this country just claim outrageous falsehoods in opposition to simply the need to have health care that doesn't exclude pre-existing conditions. So I know that those bad faith arguments will happen no matter what language is put around the need for rent control or housing as human right. What's going to be important is that we talk to our neighbors and then we work together to say that we all deserve that dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Both well said. I just want to add, this is one of, I will say, we have gotten far in this conference, not far enough. The idea of having right to counsel, money for right to counsel, was thought impossible just months ago, and not politically possible. And to even have a conversation about rent control, not possible. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but I think both councils are correct. It only happens if you're going to hold every elected official, those in charge of the system, accountable. I think certainly the pandemic has, again, shed a glaring spotlight on the inequities in the system. More people are, at least anecdotally, we hear and see more people viewing housing as a human right. However, still far the majority see it as a commodity. And as we see the inequities in the system resulting in greater economic harm and greater harm to people's health and our region's health and our Commonwealth's health, I think that's just going to give more of a launching pad for us to advocate for this to happen. It won't be easy, but I would suggest, you need to hold us and other elected officials accountable. This should be one of the main issues that people should support before they gain your support for a vote. It's playing out, even though it might be at the forefront, even in the presidential race. So this issue is not going to go away because the crisis is not going to go away. This issue was at a crisis point, conversation about rent control before COVID, and it will continue to do so. And I think we have champions leading us locally, advocates like people on this call in our communities and in office and at the State House, some in our delegation, And I do foresee a day when hopefully not too far off, we're going to be signing a rent control, at least a local option rent control bill, which here in Somerville, I think we can confidently say we would pass. We had that option. We've already stated we want that here. And really, I want to thank the councilors and others who are on this panel in the community leading the advocacy of so many of the important housing measures that are being discussed at a statewide level. So we need your fight. We need those stories. We need to pluck a value string amongst those who are ignorant to what rent control really is and what it does, and those who have been sort of intractable from their opposition to it. So we're going to get there, and we got a battle to get it. A few more questions to come in, and thank you. From Ava Eggers, my elderly mother has extra rooms in her house and would, actually, Eva's just, sorry, I'm going to go down to the figure in the message. Here it goes. My elderly mother has extra rooms and would like to take someone in that needs housing, but she is also afraid of COVID. Is that something you could help facilitate and help her be sure that the person or persons are safe for her? In short, yes, but first let me just say thank you. Thank you. That's what I think the councils and others, and we all have mentioned, when we say we're all in this together, thank your mother for considering doing that. If you can, Ellen, I think your office, we can help facilitate that. And even on the health side, we can facilitate testing and screening before someone comes in, and we can work all those details out. But I think we're all so moved and inspired by that. That's the selflessness that I think truly reflects what a true community and American spirit is. Thank you very much. So Eva, if you can, we can provide a contact for you so you can reach out to Ellen's office directly if you want to provide gospel. From an anonymous attendee, I know, oh, that's we already did that one. From Joe Lynch. I think we know who Joe Lynch is. Joe. For rentals, who may also experience financial hardship due to no income from renters. And there's a city working with local lenders for some type of delay in mortgage payments. I'm sorry, Councilor Stresso, did you want to?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, could you repeat that? Your microphone kind of got crunchy for a second. Could you please repeat?
Okay, my apologies. Thank you for telling me that. What resource does the city have for small property owners, 2 to 4 rentals, that must mean 2 to 4 units, who may also experience financial hardship due to no income from renters? And there's a city working with local lenders for some type of delay in mortgage payments. Ellen, I know you have some input, but I'll just say we've been advocating, and everyone on this panel, not just for an eviction moratorium and resources to pay back rent, but for mortgage forbearance. We know, as has been stated, people depend on that rent to pay the mortgage, and we can't afford, if they lose their home, the renters lose their apartment as well. We understand that, as well as that for our small businesses who need to pay, the lessee of their small business location. We're working on all those fronts to advocate for forbearance. Ellen, others, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's just a couple things I would say, because the state moratorium that ends on Saturday does require banks to give a 6-month period of forbearance to any owners that are unable to pay their mortgage because of some COVID-related loss of income. Go to your bank tomorrow, right? That protection may not be in place. Send an email tomorrow and make sure that you ask for your 6 months of forbearance if you haven't gotten it. And just know that they are not allowed to charge you all of the money that the 6 months of mortgage that you didn't have to pay at the end of that mortgage. It has to be added in months onto the end of your mortgage periods. We've seen some instances here where banks are trying to say, pay up all that you didn't pay right at the end of that 6 months. Not legal, but get that request for forbearance in now. The other thing that I wanted to say is that mortgage assistance is available through RAFT. Our office does help small landlords, homeowners who are in need of mortgage assistance because of a loss of income. You do have to meet certain income requirements, but we're here. I'm here. You can contact me personally if you need to. My information is on our website, but you can also do an intake. We are here to try to help you to access mortgage assistance, and you can access mortgage assistance for yourself and help your tenants to access rental assistance. So there really are some tools here that can help make sure that small landlords are getting the rent that they need or are being forgiven the mortgage payments that they otherwise would need to pay. But the last thing is, that's why that housing guarantees bill is so important that Representative Connolly and Senator Jalen put in, because these protections end on the 17th. With that bill, they will extend, because we all know that the crisis of COVID has not ended. People have not gotten their income back. So it's really important both to act now to protect yourself, but also to understand how this fits into the larger political picture and get involved. Get involved. Happy to help you to think about how to do that as well. But thanks for the question.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just add, I want to make it really clear that this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that we are all in this together. The idea that small landlords, folks who have owned their homes here for generations, are going to be put at risk by their tenants by showing decency and mercy to their tenants is exactly the kind of problem that we need to change this system to fix. And that housing stability bill does exactly that in a small degree, just to extend these protections for a little while longer. But we keep talking about this system, and I think it's important to name it. It's important to name the capitalism that is putting us all at risk. So these measures are not about tenants over landlords. It's about all of us finding a better way to live together. So yes, it will absolutely help those small landlords.
Well said. Let me check it. Any further questions? We'd love to have it. Someone asked, can you share the website again for seeking help? We're going to put that back up in the chat function again if we haven't already done so. Questions and answers. I want to remind everyone, we will share this video on the city's YouTube channel, in that someone feel free to reach out. We implore you to reach out to us no matter whether you think we have resources for you or not. We will help do our best to guide you and get you to the resources you need or the information that you need. We're here for you. Counselors, members of the panel, since we have a couple of minutes and there are no questions and answers, if one pops up, we'll take it. Give you the opportunity for any other closing comments. Councilor Stresso, Councilor Scott, and then to the panel.
Thank you.
Rest of the panel.
Thank you very much. I think we're at a pivotal point with our national history, but also here in the Commonwealth and here in Somerville, of what we can do to really support our community. We all know, and no one would disagree, that housing and the inequity has been an issue that's been carried on for a long time and ignored for a long time, or not funded properly for a long time. And we have some very vitally important decisions to make, how we treat one another. And we can put some compassionate policies forward to really advance us all as a community. And I'm hoping that we take that path. I'm on board, and we all need everybody's help with that. Thank you very, 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 very much.
Well, thank you for your advocacy and leadership and being part of the panel. Councilor Scott, did you want to add anything before we sign off?
Oh, I think I've said enough tonight, but I just do want to remind people again that in addition to all these resources that are available, please don't hesitate to reach out to me again with my weekly office hours every Friday from 8 to 10, or by email or phone, and I'm happy to connect you, whether it's to organizing resources or other resources that the city may not have access to. Anything I can do to help my neighbors. Thanks.
We do have another question that came in. I think it's important I answer this one. And the question is from an anonymous attendee. And thank you for the question. It states, when will you open up all businesses again so we can go back to work and pay for our own rent? I really appreciate this question. It is a fair one. I think it obviously relates to the restrictions and protocols in place, health protocols as a result of COVID. First, let me say I was asked a question today by the media insinuating that it's the protocols or measures put in place that has resulted in an economy that's been taken. That is just not true. The pandemic has resulted in the economy failing and declining, and it resulted in so many economic hardships as well as sickness and death. Our goal as we consider and approach reopening of any sectors of our lives or the economy is guided by really two goals. One, to ensure that when we do something, we continue to ensure the health and safety well-being of everyone in our community, and that any reopening is sustainable. To reopen again and rush to reopening, much like the governor has done, and we see cases rising. And if we're into a situation like at the beginning of this pandemic, where we have broad closures, does not serve business as well. It would be difficult to recover from that. I'll tell you what we are doing to move to help small businesses, and I'll be working with these councils and the entire council and the community. We'll be gathering, we are working together and having a meeting with all the lenders and banks we can engage with to understand their lending practices, especially the small and local businesses, because credit is freezing up. We're going to be working with major developers to partner with the city to provide funding and resources to think about what Main Street looks like coming out of this pandemic, and to help businesses be in a position to grow, start up, or recover from it. We're going to be meeting with organizations like Union Square Main Street, the Somerville Main Street, Somerville Local First, the Chamber of Commerce, and businesses to understand what is it you really need. And we have a lot of this information already, but I want to clarify that, and this is backed up by data, it is the pandemic. There can be no healthy recovery and sustainable recovery without a healthy society. And if consumers or customers aren't confident that they can frequent any business and do so safely, they're not going to come. Confidence is at an all-time low. We're acutely aware, everyone in this panel, not just the hardships and tragedies that await us on the housing front and that we're facing, but to our small businesses. And while we see investment in larger entities in the city continue to grow, that's good. It's those small businesses, especially those independently, locally owned and operated, that make up Somerville's DNA, our originality, our creativity, our diversity, our identity that attract people to Somerville. I would ask you to reach out to us as well. I'm going to put up another link here, either to the mayor's office or to the Office of Strategic Planning, Community Development, Economic Development Division, because we are working with these councils and others to provide more resources. We did an initial round of $1 million, the Small Business COVID Relief Fund, and we're going to be doing another round announcing soon of about $500,000. And I can assure you that everyone in this panel has that as our focus. Council Scott just mentioned again, we're all in this together. We're not leaving anyone behind. There's no competing interest here. We can't shut the door on anyone who's suffering from this crisis. So that being said, we're going to continue to work with all stakeholders to make sure that we're helping you maneuver in this new reality of COVID that continues to change, and right now, not for the better. So I don't see councilors, other members of panel, any other questions here or comments? I want to thank our panel. Go ahead, Ellen. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing, and I apologize. I just wanted to say to people, I can't promise you that the Office of Housing Stability can solve all your problems, but I promise you that you will be treated with dignity and respect. You will be seen as people, and we will do our best to understand what you're going through and help. I know sometimes contacting the government is not the first thing that people choose to do. Our staff is fantastic. We want to be there as much as we can, and we are committed to doing this work because we believe in housing justice and we believe that housing is a right. So that's the promise that we can make to you.
Thank you, Ellen. So again, thank you to our panel. More importantly, thank you for all of you who have joined us tonight, who might watch this later, who have asked questions. And again, as has been stated, reach out to us. We will help you find the answers. If we don't have the answers ourselves, we will work with you. Thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening and stay healthy and be safe. God bless.